Number 10. He became the fattest man on Earth. This bizarre storyline is from 1960, and in it, the evil Gorilla Grodd has transferred his consciousness into human form to confront the Flash. He shoots Flash with a radiation gun that causes his body to absorb excess moisture from the air, making Barry swell up like a water balloon to an alarming and uncomfortable looking size. Not only that, Grodd also erases his memories and sells him to a heartless sideshow owner who puts Barry on display and charges people to come and see the fattest man alive. I can only imagine how cringy it would be to try and read this story today and take it seriously. We get to see a deeply depressed Barry, exploited, embarrassed, and dejected, with little kids pointing and laughing at him. Thankfully, he does eventually recover his memory and his figure. Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see more, be sure to take a second and hit that like button. Number 9. His face was disfigured. Not everything on this list is cosmetic, but we'll get into the more emotional suffering later. For now, let's talk about the time Big Sir punched the Flash's lights out. Big Sir is one of the Flash's lesser known villains, but he has some super strength and lands a clean, super powered blow right in Barry's face, and the signature speedster passes out in the bushes at the park. Two kids happen across his body and recoil in horror when they take a peek under his mask. His face is so smashed up it's barely even recognizable. His teeth are chipped, his eyes swollen shut, it's brutal. Seriously hurt, he heads to Gorilla City and gets patched up by his friend Solivar, leader of the super intelligent gorilla race. They heal him up and rebuild his face differently to help keep his identity secret. Luckily, they go with the usual 2 eyes, 1 nose, regular looking face. In the future, advanced surgery helps Flash eventually return to the face that we know and love. Number 8. Almost burned to death. In the Flashpoint universe, Barry doesn't have his superpowers, so he works together with Thomas Wayne, that reality's version of Batman, to come up with a scheme to try to get his powers back, so that he can run back in time and fix the timeline. So the plan is simple: recreate the events that originally gave him his powers, by covering himself in chemicals and then getting struck by lightning. Thomas, for good reason, has a lot of concerns, but Barry races ahead with the plan, and it doesn't go well. He is struck by lightning, but instead of receiving powers, he almost roasts to death, getting 3rd-degree burns all over his body. Thomas bandages up what's left of Barry's skin while he screams in agony, and we see Barry lying on a gurney, soaked in blood and covered head to toe in bandages. It is a bit of a gruesome scene and definitely inspires some sympathy for the Flash. Number 7. Captured and tortured. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, a lot of things got really cranked up. Many heroes were pushed to their limits, and good old Barry is no exception. The Flash gets captured by the Anti-Monitor, and then mentally tortured by the evil Psycho Pirate, who has the ability to manipulate emotions. Barry endures this for weeks, with Psycho Pirate forcing him to relive his worst memories and emotions over and over again. We see poor Barry cowering in the dark, terrified for his life, forced to watch as his fellow Justice League member Red Tornado is killed right before his eyes. When he finally breaks free, he's been through so much emotional turmoil, he goes buck wild with rage and beats on Psycho Pirate until he begs for mercy. Definitely a low point for the Flash. Number 6. His wife Iris West was killed by Zoom. Since the first appearance of Barry Allen in 1956, he's been paired up with Iris West, another DC power couple like Lois and Clark. They've been married and had all kinds of relationship drama. While she's attending a costume party dressed as Batgirl, Zoom waits for her in the kitchen, and when she comes to get a drink, he kills her. Using his speed powers to vibrate his hand at turbo speed, he passes his hand through her skull and does fatal damage to the molecules inside her brain. This causes instantaneous death, and the tragedy of it all is devastating for Barry. Later in the story, his true love is brought back to him through some time travel stuff and reincarnation, but it's still a seriously heart-wrenching moment for the Flash. Number 5. He killed a man. After the death of his first wife, Barry eventually met and fell in love with Fiona Webb, and the two dated on and off. She worked for a senator named Creed Phillips on his election campaign. When Creed is revealed to secretly be the villain Eradicator and later dies, Fiona and Barry realize through the whole ordeal that they really do love each other and decide that they're going to get married. On the day of the wedding, the Reverse Flash, Professor Zoom, shows up again and attacks Barry. The two race across the city fighting each other, but when Zoom switches his focus to Barry's fiancée, Flash goes into a rage and he runs up and grabs him by the neck from behind. Unfortunately, the sheer force of this alone snaps the villain's neck and kills him, and Barry is racked with guilt over having killed someone. The city even has him stand trial, and his longtime friend Wally testifies against him, saying Flash should have done more to stop Zoom without killing him. It's a real low point for Barry, and he's forced to flee to another time period. Number 4. His nephew Wally died. If suffering all this physical and emotional pain wasn't bad enough, Barry has also seen the death of his beloved nephew Wally West. Wally and his aunt are driving, racing to stop Iris's brother from killing the Flash. They end up getting in a car crash on the way, and not wearing seatbelts, the results of the crash are pretty brutal. Iris is left permanently paralyzed, and Wally is thrown from the vehicle. Barry arrives to see Wally's lifeless body on the road, and Iris being loaded into an ambulance. Flash blames himself for not being able to stop the accident, and the death of Wally sends him into a dark period of sadness and guilt. Number 3. Parents dead. Things weren't always this way. Maybe it was the success of Superman or Batman stories, but either way, when DC rewrote the Flash's backstory in Rebirth, they gave him the old cliche tragic past. In this new version of his history, his mother Nora is brutally murdered when he's a child. Not only that, his father is wrongfully sent to prison for the crime. And if that wasn't bad enough, his father dies in prison before he can be proved innocent, and the Flash goes through it all alone. It's only later in life that he learns it was the Reverse Flash, Professor Zoom, that murdered Nora and framed his father Henry for the crime to ruin Barry's life. Ironically, the plan backfires, and these events lead to Barry becoming a forensic scientist for the police, and then later becoming the hero known as the Flash. Number 2. Returns to the past and allows his mother's death. Alright, we've seen a lot of stuff. How could it possibly be worse? Well, one time, Barry woke up in an alternate reality where his mother is still alive. In the Flashpoint universe, his mother is alive and his father was never framed for murder. It sounds great and Barry gets a nice touching reunion, but there's actually a bunch of other stuff in this universe that's different too. Like Bruce Wayne was killed instead of his parents. On top of that, in this universe, Wonder Woman and Aquaman have basically caused a huge war in Europe, causing massive destruction and devastation. Barry decides he needs to reset the timeline, even though it means losing his mother again. Barry does do the heroic thing in the end, and sacrifices his own happiness to put everything back to normal. Number 1. Sacrificed himself to save the multiverse. In the crossover event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Barry makes the ultimate sacrifice, his own life. The Anti-Monitor has constructed a giant antimatter cannon to destroy the various Earths, and Barry does what he has to do to stop it. He runs against the antimatter to destroy the weapon, running so fast he's going back through time, reliving his memories as his body disintegrates. The pain becomes so intense at one point that he cries out for help with nobody to hear him. He reminds himself that there is always hope, and he keeps pushing even as his body is breaking down completely. He leaves us with a final message, that we must save the world, and Barry Allen dies a hero. This version of him anyways. Number 10. His fiancée had a nervous breakdown. Barry Allen has had a few love interests in his lifetime, and Fiona Webb is a prominent one. They fall in love after Iris West, and Barry eventually asks Fiona to marry him. However, when their special day finally comes around, old Professor Zoom shows up and ruins everything. He almost succeeds in killing Fiona. When Barry is busy fighting Zoom as the Flash, he fails to show up at the altar in time, and Fiona thinks he's a runaway groom. The horror and stress of it all sends her over the edge, and she has a breakdown. She winds up getting committed to the hospital as her mental state deteriorates, and it's made even worse when Barry decides to come visit. See, he uses his speed powers to bypass hospital security to visit her, and he doesn't show up on the hospital videotapes, so they think she's crazy when she mentions that the Flash came to visit her. She winds up smashing herself in the face with a picture of Barry and getting carted off on a stretcher, presumably to a padded room. And that's only number 10, folks. The Flash really has a rough time. Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see some more, make sure you take a second and hit that like button. Number 9. He let crime run rampant in Central City. In 1987, DC released The Flash issue number 200, in which Wally has his secret identity revealed. He's pretty upset with the public's newfound knowledge of him because he knows the considerable danger this poses to his friends and his loved ones. He winds up taking an offer from Spectre to wipe the general public's memory of the Flash, including his own. In the final pages of this comic, we see the full ramifications of this decision. Wally and everyone else has completely forgotten the identity of the Flash, or whatever happened to him. This comic even explicitly states that the loss of the Flash caused a significant increase in the crime rates in Central City. Countless people suffer and possibly die without a hero patrolling the streets. It's a pretty grim look at things, but perhaps Wally regains his memory later in time? I don't really want to ruin anything for you guys. Let's keep on rolling. Number 8. His brother became a supervillain. Surely almost everybody knows Barry Allen, but there is another, Malcolm Allen. Barry has a secret twin brother who he originally thought died in birth. However, when these two come face to face, it was far from a happy reunion. Malcolm was secretly given to a family of abusive con artists with superpowers, and they constantly taunted him for being inferior while they raised him. Man, that is really messed up. Like, why would you adopt a kid and then just give him a hard time for not being good enough? Like, this is the kid that you picked. Anyway, by the time Malcolm tracks down Barry, he's pretty angry and envious of Barry's life, as you can imagine, and so he vows to kill Barry and everything he holds dear. His adoptive grandmother teaches him how to use the family superpowers, and so he reinvents himself as the supervillain Cobalt Blue. It's not the Flash's fault or anything, it's just another of the many hard knocks the Flash suffers throughout his life. Psychotic vengeful brother? Check. Number 7. Forced to fight his own grandson. How about psychotic vengeful grandson from the future? Also check. During the crossover called Blackest Night, the villain Necron reanimated dead DC characters with some black power rings and created a zombie army of Black Lanterns. Bart Allen is Barry's grandson, who recently died and was resurrected. Barry has temporarily become a Blue Lantern during this event, and he has to face off against his evil grandson. When the two do battle in a graveyard, Bart shows his resentment as he cruelly taunts Barry while the two of them fight. Barry tries to remove the black ring, but is interrupted by an undead version of Reverse Flash. Barry manages to connect with the living Bart beneath the surface by contacting him inside the Speed Force, and they have a really wholesome reunion. Barry owns up to his neglect as he guides Bart through the process of breaking free from the control of the ring. It's a really heartwarming moment. Number 6. Attacked by his future self. Now what if Barry did battle against a psychotic vengeful version of himself? This has also happened, and just another great example of the many struggles of the Flash. Not only does he deal with some super heavy duty villains and storylines, but being a speedster, he's also constantly battling against the past and the future half of the time. In this storyline, we're introduced to a whole new future Barry. After a devastating accident that basically ruins his life, we meet future Barry. It's 20 years into the future, in fact. He's become really hardcore and a little bit unstable. We even see him throw a dude off of a roof and leave one villain to die after a fight. Worse, he discovers a rip in the Speed Force and decides the only way to set it right is to kill his younger self to repair the rip. He drags our Barry from his home and proceeds to beat him to death outside of the city. The young Barry doesn't even stand a chance against his older counterpart, who has been trained by the best in the DC universe. Just when the future Barry is about to break his neck, a future version of Wally West shows up and saves him. With the rip in the Speed Force getting worse, Wally winds up sacrificing himself in the end, and future Barry is left alone, having lost his nephew and sort of become evil. Number 5. He became the Black Flash. The Black Flash is the representation of death for anyone connected to the Speed Force. Once the Black Flash catches up with a speedster, they immediately die. It's like regular death, except it catches up with you a lot faster. When Barry Allen is chasing down the evil speedster SAVITAR, he reaches out to grab him, and to his surprise, the villain crumbles to dust the moment he is touched. Later, another speedster is turned to dust by Barry's touch, and he realizes he is to blame. Something is wrong with him. He and Wally later on discover that he's been turned into the Black Flash. As his mind and body are slowly taken over by the Black Flash entity, he does the only thing he can. He runs back to the Speed Force, where he was once trapped for years. Even Superman tries to get him to stop, but he fails, and Barry sacrifices himself to save everyone. Again. Number 4. He had to break out of prison. In The Flash number 164, we got to see the Flash kind of go buck wild in a prison and kick the snot out of some guards. It's not the usual scene for a superhero, but it was pretty neat. What's really wild is, we later learn that the guards are actually only trying to imprison the Flash because he is in a mirror dimension where he doesn't actually exist. In this world, anyone with superpowers is evil, so they obviously don't trust old Wally West. The thing that's wild about this is, Wally could have maybe tried to explain himself. I know the guards likely would have been having none of his crap and would have laid the beat down anyways, but isn't being a hero kinda about asking questions first and butt kicking second? I guess it depends on which superhero you ask. Anyways, whether you find it justifiable or not, Wally really puts the hurt on a whole bunch of guards in this comic, and I suspect he could have escaped without causing quite so much collateral damage. Number 3. He is sued for letting a woman burn. This one comes from 1989 in The Flash number 89. This story is focused around the limitations of the Flash's speed-based abilities. The Flash is actually in court in this issue, being sued for negligence in the case of a woman who tragically lost her legs in a building fire. Initially, readers are made to sympathize with the Flash because it's presumed that he just didn't see her or something. However, Flash later reveals that he feels like he did have enough time to look for her, and by focusing on other things, he left an innocent woman in a situation where she likely would have died. It's a pretty unique story where we see the weight and responsibility of a superhero's day-to-day decisions, and we also bear witness to the potential for tragedy that lies in every choice a superhero makes. Number 2. He messed with the space-time continuum. Dude, if there's any one takeaway from all this speedster stuff, not to mention decades of movies and stories about time travel, it's that you never mess with the time-space continuum. I'm not entirely sure how it works, but the one thing we all understand is you're not supposed to mess with it. In part 1 of this video, we mentioned how Barry's mother was murdered and his father was framed for it. Well, Barry Allen once tried to go back in time and save his mother, and it caused the entire Flashpoint event. It was an act with obviously good intentions, but man, the implications were seriously unsustainable. You think Barry would understand the potential for catastrophe in this kind of time traveling nonsense, but he just gives it the old college try anyways. As you can imagine, it doesn't really work out the way Flash wanted in the end. Number 1. Trapped Zoom in his worst memory. Leading up to The Flash number 200, published in 2003, Wally had been in battle against the insane speedster Zoom for the past few issues. Enlisting every speedster who would join, Wally borrowed their speed to aid him in his fight against Zoom. Despite this incredible newfound power, it's all Wally can do to keep up with Zoom as the two of them fight. In the midst of the battle, Zoom attacks Linda, Wally's wife at the time, releasing a sonic boom that injures her and ends the lives of babies in her womb. As you can imagine, Wally is really overcome with emotion because of this, and he gets a boost of rage and finally catches Zoom and finishes the battle. In the heat of the moment, he basically forces the villain through a rift in time, trapping him in an endless loop in a moment from the past. We see Zoom later, trapped in a tube, endlessly reliving the worst moment of his life.
Starting us off in at number 10, killing everyone in Sanctuary. Heroes in Crisis. Alright, let's start off our list by looking at the most recent Flash, Wally West, doing some pretty darn crazy stuff. So, between 2018 and 2019, Heroes in Crisis was a DC story event that, despite having crisis in the title, was a murder mystery by Tom King that essentially doubled down as a mental health PSA. In theory, fantastic idea. In execution, a little questionable, or at least as far as some fans were concerned. In it though, we see that there's a mass shooting at a place called Sanctuary, a rehabilitation center for superheroes that was set up by DC's Holy Trinity, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. This massacre kills off a slew of heroes, and Booster Gold and Harley Quinn become the primary suspects. But it is later revealed that the shooting was an accident caused by Wally West, whose family was wiped from existence prior. He's been suffering with a lot of stuff due to that. Mental stuff, PTSD guys, not fun. Turns out Wally West, who was amongst the death count, ran to the future, killed himself, brought back his corpse, and then planted it there to shed any onus. What the f, Wally? Eventually the truth comes out and Wally ends up in a Justice League prison and feels really crappy about himself, so yeah. Moving on to number 9, ignoring a woman's cry for help, in The Flash issue 89. Alright, so Heroes in Crisis hasn't been the only time that Wally West has found himself in a pickle involving the well-being of others. In 1994, Volume 2 of The Flash, issue 89, we witnessed the events of a civil lawsuit against Wally in which the plaintiff, Allison Armitage, was badly injured during a conflict in which Wally was fighting crime. Her injuries resulted in her legs being amputated afterwards. What the f? I would sue the shit out of Wally too if I were her. And she claims that Wally had ignored her cries for help, hence why she got injured. She sought out $20 million in compensation. Of course, Wally believes that the villain Abracadabra, who was Allison's lawyer, is truly behind this. And because of the incident, the Barry Allen Foundation makes a deal with Allison and prohibits Wally from using the costume, the persona, and the powers of the Flash. In the following issue, Wally makes amends with Allison and manages to defeat Abracadabra, but that definitely isn't gonna give Allison her legs back, will it, Wally? Just saying. In at number 8, letting Savitar kill Iris. Moving on from the comics and into the CW Flash show for this number, let's talk a little bit about the TV version of Barry Allen from the Arrowverse. In season 3, episode 22 of the show, Barry makes a series of mistakes that eventually leads to Iris's death at the hands of Savitar, who is his own time remnant. The team had actively tried to prevent Iris's death with the creation of the Speed Force Bazooka to trap Savitar, which, side note, Speed Force Bazooka is such a ridiculous weapon name. Just saying, I know it makes sense in the context of the show, but it's like the cosmic treadmill. It's like, Flash's stuff is just so silly sometimes. Lovable, but silly. The plan was to hide Iris on Earth too, but Savitar is already one step ahead of them, disguises himself as Barry, and then gets Iris and takes her to Infantino Street, the location where she's supposed to die, and also, fun fact, a street named after the comic book legend Carmine Infantino. Savitar knew ahead of time how to stop the Speed Force Bazooka, and he still manages to kill Iris after all. I mean, come on, Barry. We all know you're smarter than that. And at number 7, accidentally causing Dante Ramone's death. Returning to the CW show for this number, Barry Allen is arguably responsible for the death of Dante Ramone, the older brother of Cisco. Barry does this thing where he believes that he can change the events of tragic occurrences, like the deaths of characters. Remember Flashpoint in the comics? Yeah, although apparently according to Doomsday Clock, Dr. Manhattan was really to blame. Anywho, in the show, in his grief over the death of his father at the hands of Zoom, Barry believes that he can reverse things, so he goes back in time to save his mother Nora from being murdered. But in the process, his actions result in Dante's death, and a whole lot of grief for Cisco. And the worst part, when Cisco found out, you know he was probably like, seriously dude, another death thanks to Barry screwing with the timeline? What gives? Because this is a reoccurring thing, it's kind of problematic. Moving on to number 6, Mindfuck. In Jeff Johns' The Flash issue 200, Wally West decides to use his time manipulation abilities in a more psychological way, by making Zoom relive his worst memory over and over and over again. Harsh, Wally. Feel like that's a trick you learned from Barry, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. So let's backtrack for a sec. Wally and Zoom had been hashing it out for several issues prior, and our hero was having a real tough time bringing the Reverse Flash to justice. He had even siphoned off the speed of other good speedsters in an attempt to have more power than Zoom, but he still struggled. Zoom decided to hit Wally where it hurt most, attacking his wife Linda. Except it wasn't just Linda he was hurting. Linda was pregnant, and in the process of Zoom's attacks, the twins inside of her womb were killed, causing her to have a miscarriage. That pushed Wally over the edge, and he decided to do the worst thing he could possibly do to Zoom out of revenge. He freezes Zoom and forces him to watch the worst day of his life over and over and over again, causing the villain to shed a singular tear. That's how you know that he really got to him, that one tear. Whew. At number 5, he mind-wiped the world and let crime run rampant in The Flash issue 200. This number actually connects to our previous number. What we talked about before wasn't the only terrible thing that Wally did in that issue. He also let crime run rampant and mind-wiped the world. It's a bit of a double whammy at this number. After the conflict with Zoom wraps up, Wally decides he needs to reconsider having his identity be public because, you know, he just did some terrible stuff that doesn't look all too great. And as you can recall from our Heroes in Crisis number, Wally doesn't like to take blame for shit. Plus, the main reason is having his identity be public knowledge put Linda and his family and friends at risk. So he decided to call up his pals Hal Jordan and the Spectre to help him figure out what he should do. And Wally decides that the best approach is to mind wipe the world so everyone forgets that the Flash is Wally West. They do it, or rather the Spectre kinda does it, cause the bro's super powerful. And the mind wipe is so effective that even Wally forgets that he was the Flash for a hot second. The worst part is, the comic explicitly states after the mind wipe that because of this, there's a big boost in crime that occurs, meaning Wally's decision put a whole lot of innocent people in danger in the aftermath. Dude can't catch a break. In at 4, he gloated over the body of a dead criminal, from Flash Comics number 1. This is one of the earliest cases of the Flash being a tad extra, and it comes in Jay Garrick's tenure as the Scarlet Speedster in the Flash Comics issue 1. It was the golden age, so the occasional criminal homicide was much less of a big deal back then. Hey, Batman and Superman also knocked off a couple people back then, but no one talks about that anymore. Well, actually, we've talked about it a few times on our channel, but You guys get what we're going for here. In Flash Comics issue 1, Jay is really starting to take crime fighting and the responsibilities that go with it seriously, so he goes and seeks out a group of villains. But here's where it gets a bit fun. A villain named Sir Satan actually attempts to get away from the speedster by driving off, but Jay pursues him and then cuts the car off, which causes it to tumble down a hillside and kills Satan in the process. Instead of being like, oh crap, accidents happen I guess, Jay Garrick is like, nah, time to gloat over this criminal's corpse as he's still trapped inside of this steaming vehicle, which he does while announcing, I'm on hand just to see your finish, Sir Satan. Like a little extra there, Jay. Little unnecessary. Especially since no one else is there to watch you do the gloating. It's like entirely for your own selfish gain there. Little weird. Moving on to number 3, Suicidal Killin' Spree. The premise for this is pretty straightforward. The Flash in the future becomes evil, goes on a killing spree, goes back in time to kill himself, all as a means of saving himself. If you're not following, essentially, Flash went evil, and in order to save himself from being evil and killing everyone, despite killing all of the villains of the future might I add, he attempts to stop more tragedy from occurring by offing himself before he turns evil. Still a little confusing, I know. You can tell that it's the evil Barry though because he wears blue and he snaps necks. In at number 2, he killed Professor Zoom in Flash issue 324. While you could take a look into any superhero's history and find that they've committed at least one homicide since their time of having powers or beginning their careers as vigilantes, the Flash is a character who, when he's committed murder, has done it in more contemporary times. Minus the one Jay Garrick one that we mentioned earlier. Golden and Silver Age murders, sure, we'll let those slide, but when murdering a foe is a pivotal plot point in your solo series, that we can't really ignore. Such is the case in the story leading up to the famous Trial of the Flash story arc. In the Flash issue 323 from 1983, Barry is getting married to Fiona Webb. In the lead up to the wedding, Zoom begins to leave creepy messages for the Scarlet Speedster, the likes of, guess who's gonna kill your wife again? Actually. For context, Zoom aka Reverse Flash had previously murdered Iris on the day of her and Barry's wedding. Barry, late for the wedding this time around, rushes to Fiona, who thinks that she has been left at the altar because he's late. But Barry gets there just in time this time, and instead of just beating Zoom up like he did previously, he snaps his neck. Just fractions of a second before Zoom was about to kill Fiona in literally the exact same way that he had killed Iris. Barry is then arrested for manslaughter in the death of Eobard Thawne, and the Justice League are forced to decide whether or not to kick him out of the group. And finally, in at number 1, Eternal Punishment. What's worse than murder? How about eternally freezing someone's body but keeping them conscious so that they are frozen for all of time, forced to stare into the face of the one that they killed? Talk about an intense punishment. Well, that revenge was a dish Barry Allen served real cold to Thaddeus Thawne, aka Inertia, Bart Allen's clone who was mixed with Zoom's DNA. Inertia is a little shit. Not only did he steal the real Bart Allen's speed, but he was also responsible for Bart Allen being gunned down by a group of supervillains, resulting in his death. Oh, and he also taunted Barry over it, noting that Bart screamed like, I quote, a little bitch. Barry decides that death isn't enough for Inertia. He steals Inertia's Speed Force powers, turning him into a literal representation of his alias name. He's frozen for eternity in unblinking horror, only capable of breathing and thinking, forever immobilized. Barry then takes it a step further and places Inertia in the Bart Allen Museum, forcing him to stare at a statue of Bart for all eternity, describing it as Thaddeus now being, I quote, forced to stare with the eyes that take 100 years to blink at the ghost of the man he can never be. Like, good on you, Barry, real creative punishment, but also that is f***ed up, my dude.
Number 10, Speed Demon. Coming to us from the Amalgam Universe, a parallel universe that is composed of mashups of some of our favorite Marvel and DC characters, that was unfortunately destroyed thanks to the cross-multiveral conflict, comes Blaze Allen, a combination of Barry Allen and Johnny Blaze. Once a stunt rider working at a carnival, Blaze Allen becomes the Speed Demon following the death of his wife at the hands of the evil Night Spectre. He was convinced by Merlin to bond with the demon known as Etrigan, and from there, the entity known as Speed Demon was born. Granted the abilities of Ghost Rider, including his fiery powers as well as super strength, Speed Demon is not actually all that fast despite his name and lineage. While the character is a formidable fighter and an all-around powerful being, he falls very short in the speed department, especially compared to all the other speedsters. There have been other characters that have taken up this mantle, including both Jay Garrick and Wallace West, however all of their abilities seem to be similar to the originals. Check out Blaze Allen for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1996's Speed Demon, number 1. Number 9, Deceased Flash. Now a member of the anti-living, Barry Allen, formerly known as the hero The Flash, is exactly what you think he is, a zombified speedster. When the anti-life equation begins spreading worldwide, Barry went into hiding alongside Kid Flash, until they were found by Superman and Green Lantern. Leaving Wally in their more than capable hands, the Flash sped off to the Daily Planet where he encountered an infected Giganta. Thankfully though, she was taken down with a blast to the head from Cyborg. Soon after, we see the Fortress of Solitude turned into a shelter for the uninfected heroes. However, an infected Martian Manhunter was able to make it through, and not only did he kill Lex Luthor by just ripping him in half, he infected the Flash with a scratch to the back as well. Barry immediately ran out of the fortress because he didn't want to hurt or infect anyone else, and it didn't take long for him to become fully infected, and he started attacking the remaining survivors all across the world. He was finally stopped by Superman after the two collided into each other at full force, killing the speedster right then and there, but not before he was able to infect the Man of Steel. Give this storyline a read for yourself, starting with 2019's DCEASED, number 1. Number 8, Barry Allen Out of Time. Hailing from a possible future, this iteration of the Flash is a much darker Barry Allen from 20 years in the future. This future Flash first appears in the Flash Annual Volume 4 number 3 as a broken man. Reeling from the death of a close friend and fellow speedster Wally West, Future Flash travels backwards through time on a crusade to murder all the former enemies he deems responsible for West's death, hoping to somehow change the future. His actions only widen a tear in the Speed Force however, and the once hero ultimately decides to use a present day Barry Allen's energy to seal the rift, proving his superiority in a one-on-one battle against himself. Because apparently the Flash is like a fine wine and only betters with age, the pair are soon interrupted by the arrival of Wally West. Able to take on both speedsters at once, Future Flash's actions caused the one thing he began his quest to stop: the death of Wally West. Give the storyline a read for yourself, starting with the Flash Annual Volume 4 number 3, and let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Number 7, The Rival. Real name Edward Clare, the Rival is the arch-enemy of the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, and is one of the oldest speedsters around. Clarence was a professor at the university Jay Garrick went to and believed that he had the know-how and means to recreate the speed formula that gave Jay Garrick his powers in the first place. He was able to develop a drug derivative of the same formula called Velocity 9, and after taking it himself he gained the powers a speedster would have. However, he found out that they were only temporary. He became the criminal that he is because his findings were rejected by his fellow science peers, and decided then to don a darker version of Jay Garrick's costume and commit crimes under the name The Rival. After losing to the Flash the first time, the Rival resurfaced a couple months later, and during his battle with the Flash, he was somehow able to reach light speed and just vanished and was stuck traveling through the Speed Force until he was pulled out by Johnny Sorrow. Check him out for yourself in his first appearance in 1949's Flash Comics number 104. Number 6, Dark Flash. Walter West is essentially an identical version of Wally West, just from another timeline, with their two histories mirroring each other's up until one certain point. Walter's version of Linda Park, the girlfriend/wife of Wally, is killed during a battle with Cobra. Turning him into a very bitter speedster and eventually the Dark Flash, Walter develops an authoritarian zero-tolerance policy for criminals, going so far as to cruelly maim them if they denied his actions and got in his way. Eventually, Walter learned that the love of his life was still alive and well in another timeline, and he set out to defeat Wally West and completely replace him. Able to easily take on his alternate timeline counterpart, Wally, who is often considered the fastest character to take up the Flash mantle, which further extends the parallel between the two. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1999's Chain Lightning finale, Finish Line. Number 5, Johnny Quick. A member of the Crime Syndicate of America, an evil version of the Justice League hailing from Earth 3, Jonathan Allen is Johnny Quick, the Flash of this universe. After conquering the entirety of Earth 3, the Crime Syndicate of America decided to abandon their Earth to terrorize and take over Earth 1 and 2. It took the combined efforts of the Justice League and the Justice Society of America to stop them, although unfortunately for everyone that wasn't the end of their reign of terror. Now Johnny was initially depicted as being slower than the Flash, however he figured out a way to make up for his shortcomings by developing a helmet that vastly increased his top speed while also deepening his relationship with the Speed Force, making Johnny Quick more than a match for the Flash. Since then, Johnny has shown tremendous command over the Speed Force, defeating countless superheroes in a matter of microseconds in the Forever Evil storyline. It was only after Alexander Luthor, aka Mazza, stole his power that he met his end. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1964's Justice League of America number 29, or feel free to skip ahead to his newer iteration starting with 2013's Justice League Volume 2, number 23. Number 4, The Red Death. Once the hero of Gotham, Bruce Wayne from Earth -52 was forced to seek more extreme approaches to prevent crime after losing all of his Robins. Coming to the conclusion that he wasn't quite fast enough to fight crime, Bruce set his eyes on the Flash, deeming himself more worthy of the Speed Force than Barry Allen, which is pretty presumptuous, but okay, whatever floats your boat. After defeating Barry, Bruce strapped him to the front of the Batmobile and drove them both into the Speed Force using the power of the Batmobile combined with the Cosmic Treadmill. The two merged together and Batman became the Red Death, using his new powers to kill instead of just stopping crime, much to Barry's dismay as his consciousness was still very much alive in Bruce's head. Like all of the Dark Knights of the multiverse, the Red Death represents one of Batman's fears, this one being losing members of the Bat family and his love for them and regret for those he failed. His dialogue and his Speed Force infection also imply he might represent Batman's fear of old age slowing him down as well. Check him out in his first appearance in 2017's Dark Days, the casting, number 1. Number 3, Reverse Flash. No, we're not talking about Eobard Thawne, we're going to be looking at the second Reverse Flash, Daniel West. Daniel ran away from home at an early age because of his abusive and drunk father, and by the time he was 18, he had fallen into the wrong crowd and was a small-time thug. All he wanted more than anything was to mend his relationship with his sister Iris, but after his first attempt he was thwarted by the Flash and sent to jail for 5 years. When he got out, he wanted nothing more than to kill his abusive father because he felt that was the only way he could make amends with his sister, and gained his Speed Force powers that allowed him to travel back in time after a monorail crashed, and from then on he called himself the Reverse Flash and killed anyone who had a connection to the Speed Force so that he could drain their power. It got to the point where the only two left with a connection to the Speed Force were the Flash and Iris West, and Daniel was able to go back in time to attempt to kill his father. However, it didn't really work out, because his younger self and Iris caught him in the act. He then realized the error of his ways and turned his powers over to the Flash, who set everything right once again. Check out this Reverse Flash for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 2012's The Flash, Volume 4, number 0. Number 2, Black Flash. They say death eventually catches us all, but what happens when you're too fast even for death itself? Well, that's where the Black Flash comes in. Easily one of the most mysterious entities in the DC universe, Black Flash is a symbol of death for speedsters across the multiverse, appearing just before the death of every significant speedster. Able to easily keep pace with the fastest beings in existence, it seems death really is impossible to outrun, even for speedsters. The Black Flash first made an appearance when Wally West seemingly cheated death by using his speedster powers to escape the inevitable. When the Black Flash realized he needed a human host to properly function, he chose Linda Park as his host. After Flash Rebirth brought back Barry Allen from the dead, he also noticed that the Speed Force was changing him, and it was revealed that the Reverse Flash's actions had mutilated the Speed Force and was turning Barry Allen, its avatar, into the Black Flash itself. The entity that could turn any speedster to just by touching him. The current host of the Black Flash mantle is Eobard Thawne, aka the Reverse Flash. Check out this Horseman of Death for yourself, starting with 1998's The Flash, Volume 2, number 138. Number 1, Godspeed. August Hart was the former detective partner of Barry Allen. August was the only witness to Barry's accident that turned him into the Flash, so while going after a criminal organization called the Black Hole, August was struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City. He became the Flash's quote-unquote partner, but in secret. August became the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed, and got his revenge on who he suspected to be his brother's killer. Godspeed is basically what the Flash would be if Barry Allen had one bad day. The Flash refrains from using his lethal force, but Godspeed doesn't at all. Godspeed's argument is that Central City would have been a much safer place had the Flash shown some bloodlust. He proves this point when he kills Eobard Thawne, aka the Reverse Flash, who didn't have any speedster powers at the time. Thawne did get his revenge eventually though, because after Barry brings back Thawne via time travel, that Thawne kills August. Man, keeping up with that whole time travel and speedster thing is so tough. Either way, Godspeed is one of the most deadly and dangerous enemies the Flash has ever had to race against. Check them out for yourself, starting with 2016's The Flash Rebirth Volume 2, number 1.
Coming in at number 10, we have Dawn and Dawn Allen. We might as well smash these two onto the same point because you could put them side by side and it would be hard to tell the difference. What happens when two speedsters get busy? Well, apparently they make two more speedsters. These guys reproduce like rabbits. When Barry Allen and Iris West decided to have a kid, they popped out twins and they got Dawn and Dawn Allen. Yeah, the D-O-N and D-A-W-N. It seems that the Flashes are great at running super fast, but they aren't good when it comes to naming things. The two of them of course got both their parents' speed powers and they became known as the Tornado Twins. Now that is a good name for a couple of twins that can run super fast. Are they heroes? Well, kinda. They have been part of a few super teams, but sometimes they run off and do things that are on their own terms. I would classify these two as neutral. Honestly, that's a good place to be if you got superpowers. It's like being a freelancer. You don't have to to be super all the time, less pressure on your shoulders, and you can turn evil at any time you want. Coming in at number 9, we have Johnny Tyler. Not every person who becomes a member of the Flash family needs to do so through blood or birth. Some of them will unlock the Speed Force all on their own, and that's the story with Jessie Chambers. She became a speedster known as the Flash, and also Jessie Quick, which I think is one hell of a good super name. But we're here to talk about Johnny Tyler. Well, Jessie is his mom, and even though we haven't seen Johnny be much more than a baby since he was born during the Convergence saga, where Brainiac decided he would mix several timelines together and basically restart the DC universe again, we might get to see Johnny Tyler in the future as a new Flash that comes in to save the day in the moment of crisis. That's a good way to intro a new character. And there was something very interesting revealed about people who used the Flash Force while Jessie was pregnant with Johnny. She started to lose her powers. They came back after she gave birth, but during the pregnancy she was slowing down. I guess that's the body's way of protecting a baby. I don't know if running so fast you rip through time is good for a developing fetus. Coming in number 8, we have Jenny Ognetz, one of Barry Allen's many grandkids, and she is a powerful one at that. As a teen, she seems to have a great understanding of the Speed Force and can take down some of the toughest villains of her era. She has even been strong enough to become a member of the Legion of Heroes at a very young age. Coming in at number 7, we have Jay West. Could you imagine that you are such a powerful teen that you're manifested in the dark universe? Well, that's pretty much Jay West. Jay West is the son of Wally West, and through his father's fears and powers in the Speed Force, he was created in the dark universe. This was because Wally was so afraid that he would never see his family again. The future of this young speedster is unknown at this point, but there was a future that Dr. Manhattan saw that had Jay become a powerful hero and eventually the Turtle. The Turtle is of course one of the arch enemies of the Flash because he has the ability to drain the Speed Force from the Flash and slow time around him. Seems like the perfect counter move. Now, will Jay grow up to be an all-powerful supervillain? He was created in the dark universe, so he might use his powers for his own gain. Or will he become the Turtle as a force for good and steal the villainous mantle for the side of justice? I mean, time will tell, or it won't. The universes get reset every 12 minutes, so who knows what the future holds and if any of it will stick. Coming in at number 6, we have Iris West. Let's stick with the West family for our next point. Iris was also created in the dark universe, manifested by the same fear that Wally has of not seeing his family ever again. I didn't know that you can make kids that way. You just have to be so afraid of being alone that you materialize them out of thin air while you're running super fast. I don't think they've come up with a type of birth control for that yet, but if there's money there, you can believe that they will make it. But just like her brother and father, she possesses all the powers that the Speed Force has, and Dr. Manhattan saw a future for her as well. She's supposed to become the new Kid Flash. So could there be a future where her and her brother are mortal enemies, one of them being the Flash and the other being the Turtle? That would be some of the HBO style writing that we all come to comics for. Once family and sworn to protect each other until the end of time, now they are enemies that will kill one another on sight. Oh, that's beautiful. Coming in at number 5, we have Nora Allen. In the Justice League Legacy universe, we have the existence of Nora Allen. I would say the unfortunate existence, not because Nora is a bad character, no, she's actually very cool, but because the Legacy universe is kind of run down. Most of the heroes have been killed, leaving Nora and a new league of youngsters to set up and try and keep what's left of the world safe. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a fun time if you ask me. Coming in at number 4, we have Velocity. I mean, is a clone a kid? Kinda. They share the same DNA. They have to be grown from an embryonic state. They share your traits. Well, they share all of your traits. But for the sake of this list, we're getting a few clones on here to even things out. And Velocity is one of my favorites. Not only is he cloned from one of the original Flashes, Jay Garrick, it's hard to say who is actually the original Flash with all the time traveling that goes on with the Flash family. Also, can we talk about how awesome Jay Garrick's little metal hat is and how strange it is that it never flies off? But I love that look. The only look that I would say I like more when it comes to Flashes is Velocity. He's got an all black suit with a red eye cover. He looks like they took Knight Rider and then morphed him into a being that is even faster and cooler than the car. Velocity has all your standard Flash powers along with some more advanced ones like being able to move his molecules through solid objects. I've always thought that is cool but a risky move whenever the Flash tries to pull something like that off. But he's got a weakness that other Flash members don't have to worry about. His DNA is corrupted, so if he spends too much time out of his super suit, his DNA will start to decay and he can actually die pretty quickly. I guess locking that Speed Force into a clone isn't the easiest thing in the world. Coming in at number 3, we have Inertia, the original clone of Bart Allen. Who is Bart Allen? We will get to that in just a moment. Inertia was cloned from Bart Allen, who is the grandson of Barry Allen and one of the Thwane family members. He doesn't really find his place in the world until Eobard convinces him to go back in time to fight Barry. But the two two don't really fight, they just kind of go back and forth until Barry convinces him that he doesn't actually have to be a bad guy, he can be a good guy. The kid is actually pretty easy to break through to, and he becomes a member of the Flash family. Yay! Coming in at number 2, we have Bart Allen, one of the youngest speedsters. Once again, if you're looking at when they might have popped up in the timeline, like technically Supergirl is older than Superman, but time travel is a tricky thing. Now, Bart Allen is the grandson of Barry Allen and the son of Melanie Thwayne, and we all know that Thwayne isn't a name that you want to hear when you're a member of the Flash family. We will get more into that later. But this little dude might end up being one of the most powerful members of the Flash family. For one, he has all of the Flash powers that we have talked about on this list already, and you at home already know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to break them down because we know what the basics of each Flash are. They can run fast, they can do things fast, blah blah blah. None of that is new information. But on top of the basics, Bart can also use electrokinesis, meaning he can bend and control electricity firing it out of his body. He's able to tap into cosmic energy to fill in gaps in his memory about what happened in the timeline, and he can travel through dimensions, and it would seem that he's immune to most poisons, and he's just a kid. Imagine how powerful he will be when he's a full-grown Flash. And coming in at the number 1 spot is, of course, the Reverse Flash. Eobard Thane, a dude all the way from the future, a guy from the 25th century where everything is so perfect and no one needs to worry about anything. A future where he could have stayed and been happy if he wasn't such a psycho. The Reverse Flash is one of the best villains from the DC universe and has some sort of connection to Barry in terms of DNA. He has used his powers to try and destroy every aspect of Barry's life. He has gone back and killed Barry's friends. He's gone back and killed Barry's mom. He even tried to stop Barry from getting his powers, but that would have stopped Eobard from existing as well. Eobard is using something similar to the Speed Force, but a negative version of it. And from existing in the future, he knows that he's destined to be the Flash's arch enemy, and he tries to live up to that standard.